At 11:47 local time, the Black Sea is performing its standard impersonation of a body of water that cannot decide whether it belongs to Europe or Asia, and has resolved the question by belonging fully to neither. The sky is the specific gray of an overcast that has no intention of becoming rain, but equally no intention of clearing. An atmospheric holding pattern that the region has perfected across several centuries of geopolitical ambiguity. Visibility is 12 nautical miles. The sea state is moderate, which in Black Sea terms means the kind of chop that makes a destroyer's deck slightly uncomfortable and makes everything aboard a smaller vessel considerably more exciting. USS Donald Cook, hull number DDG-75, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is making 14 knots on a standard Black Sea transit that has been generating strongly worded diplomatic communications from Moscow since the day it began, which is approximately how the U.S. Sixth Fleet measures whether a transit is going well. On the bridge, the officer of the deck is conducting the specific kind of watch standing that Black Sea transits require, which is identical to normal watch standing, except that the diplomatic temperature outside is roughly equivalent to the water temperature inside, and the water temperature inside is not warm. She has a coffee that has been nursed for 40 minutes. The bridge watch section is alert in the practiced way of people who have been alert for an extended period and have metabolized alertness into something that looks like calm, but is actually calibrated readiness. The AN/SPY-1D phased array radar is painting a picture that includes two Turkish cargo vessels to the north, a Russian research vessel that has been paralleling USS Donald Cook's track since 1015 and is either the worst research vessel in the history of oceanography or the most obvious collection platform in current operation, and a small formation of surface contacts to the east that are identified, classified, and tracked with the same professional attention given to everything in this part of the ocean that points something in the direction of an American destroyer. The tactical action officer in the Combat Information Center is on his second watch rotation of the transit. He has logged 41 separate Russian platform interactions since the ship entered the Black Sea. 41. This number is not alarming. It is the operational baseline. It is the Black Sea. He has a running log that he updates every 30 minutes, and the log has become less a record of notable events than a catalog of the specific texture of routine provocation in a body of water, where routine provocation is the standing operating procedure of approximately one major regional power. At 11:52, a new symbol appeared on his display. Air contact, fast, low, bearing 275, inbound. He had seen this before too. In Saki, at the Russian airbase on the Crimean Peninsula that Russia acquired along with everything else when it acquired Crimea in 2014, in a process that the international community describes as illegal annexation and Russia describes as a referendum, and the Black Sea describes as above its pay grade. A Su-24 Fencer attack aircraft had lifted off at approximately 11:35. The Su-24 Fencer is a Soviet-era supersonic variable sweep-wing aircraft that entered service in 1974, which was the year that another president resigned and disco was beginning its unfortunate arc toward cultural dominance. It is fast, genuinely, Mach 1.35 at altitude, respectable even by current standards. It carries a serious weapons load when it is carrying weapons, which this one was not, because the point of this mission was not to deliver munitions. The point was to demonstrate presence, generate headlines, collect whatever reaction USS Donald Cook's systems revealed through their electromagnetic emissions, and provide the Russian state media apparatus with footage that could be narrated as evidence of fearless Russian aviation confronting American aggression in waters that Moscow regards, with the specific conviction of a neighbor who has decided your driveway is a shared resource as a Russian sphere of influence. The pilot had done this before. Not this specific run against this specific ship, but runs of this type against ships of this class in this body of water. It was, in the Russian naval aviation community, something close to a rite of passage. You had not fully arrived as a Black Sea Fleet aviator until you had made an aggressive pass against an American surface combatant and come back with footage and a story for the squadron ready room. The ready room stories got better with each retelling, which is a phenomenon not unique to Russian aviation. At 11:52, the tactical action officer updated his log. He reached for the radio. Here is the problem that existed at 11:52 that did not exist at 11:51. USS Donald Cook had been conducting a scheduled SEWIP Block 3 electronic warfare system update since 11:40, a software integration process that does not interrupt the ship's primary combat systems, but does, for the duration of the update, place the AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite in a reduced collection mode that limits its ability to perform simultaneous wideband collection and active jamming functions. The update window was estimated at 22 minutes, completion at 12:02. During that window, the SLQ-32 could collect or jam, not both simultaneously, not at full capacity, across the full band. The update had been scheduled for this time slot because the threat picture at 11:40 had shown no fast-moving inbound air contacts, and the window had been selected by the electronic warfare officer with the reasonable professional judgment of a person who was not aware that a Su-24 was about to lift off from Saki. The Su-24's closure rate from Saki to USS Donald Cook's position was at low altitude and high speed, approximately 8 minutes. The SEWIP update had been running for 12 minutes when the contact appeared. Completion, 10 minutes away. 10 minutes of reduced EW capacity. Inbound fast mover at low altitude, bearing 275. The commanding officer was in CIC 40 seconds after the contact appeared. He looked at the display. He looked at the EW status board. He said, with the economy of language that distinguishes genuinely experienced commanding officers from those still working on it, EW status. SEWIP update in progress, sir. Reduced collection mode, 10 minutes to completion. Speed of inbound. Currently 540 knots, sir. Reducing to approximately 350 as he approaches the run-in point. Estimated time to closest point of approach, 9 minutes. 1 minute of overlap. The Su-24 would reach its closest point of approach approximately 1 minute after SEWIP completed. For 8 of those 9 minutes, the ship's electronic warfare suite would be operating below full capacity. The SPY-1D was tracking perfectly. The SM-2 battery was fully operational. The CIWS was fully operational. USS Donald Cook was not without options, but the EW suite, the system that, at full capacity, both catalogs every emission from an inbound aircraft and provides the electronic countermeasure capability that makes the pilot's targeting systems deeply unhappy, was running reduced. The pilot of that Su-24 was, for 8 more minutes, operating in an environment where the U.S. response to his emissions was less complete than it would normally be. He did not know this. He had lifted off expecting to find a fully operational U.S. destroyer doing exactly what it always does. What he was actually approaching was a fully operational U.S. destroyer doing exactly what it always does with one subsystem in a scheduled update window. The distinction mattered less than it might appear. It mattered enough to note. short sentences. The contact was 9 minutes out, and the clock was the clock. At 11:54, the Su-24 descended to approximately 200 feet above the wave tops. Low altitude, high-speed approach. The radar cross-section at this altitude and speed against the SPY-1D's horizon was not a surprise. The SPY-1D had been tracking it since 11:52 and had 17 different weapons employment solutions built before the aircraft crossed the 40 nautical mile mark. 17. The pilot was threading his way toward a ship that could, and this is the technical reality of the situation, delivered without drama, have resolved the encounter at any point in the preceding 6 minutes from a range at which the aircraft would have had no warning, no countermeasure, and no meaningful option. The ship chose not to do this because it had not been authorized to do this, and the pilot had not yet done anything that crossed the threshold that would change that calculation. But the Aegis system's indifference to the drama of the moment was itself the point. At 11:57, the SEWIP update completed, 3 minutes ahead of estimated schedule. The electronic warfare officer, who had been watching the inbound contact with the specific concentration of a person whose primary collection system is running at reduced capacity toward a fast-moving emitter, had pushed the update process through its final integration steps with manual intervention that the update documentation technically permitted but did not encourage, producing a result that was 3 minutes faster than standard and would generate a footnote in the maintenance log that would later be reviewed with professional interest by the people responsible for SEWIP update procedures. The footnote would not record the incoming Su-24. It would record an accelerated integration sequence. Some maintenance logs contain more operational history than they appear to. The SLQ-32 came to full capacity at 11:57. The Su-24 was 2 minutes out. The collection suite began acquiring. The Su-24 Fencer, in its Fencer D attack variant, carries a full complement of avionics and targeting systems that were genuinely capable when they were designed in the late 1970s and remain functional in the specific way that a very well-maintained vintage automobile remains functional. It runs, it performs its intended purpose, and every specialist who looks at it professionally feels the particular emotion of watching something operate outside its intended era. Its terrain-following radar broadcasts on frequencies that the SLQ-32's threat library has entries for dating to 1981. Its weapons delivery systems, in active mode, emits signatures that the collection database treats as confirmed and cataloged rather than unknown and interesting. The pilot's radar altimeter, the system keeping him at 200 feet above the wave tops at 540 knots, which is an activity that requires functional radar altimetry, or outcomes that nobody wants, was broadcasting a signal that the SLQ-32 identified, cataloged, and cross-referenced against 8 previous Su-24 interactions in less time than it took the pilot to complete his pre-run checklist. There is a specific type of professional satisfaction available to an electronic warfare officer when a high-speed emitter runs directly toward your fully operational collection suite at low altitude. Every system on the aircraft is working. Every system is emitting. The aircraft is not attempting to conceal its presence. The entire point of the mission is to be present, visibly and dramatically, in a way that generates footage and headlines. This means the aircraft is, from a collection perspective, broadcasting. It is running toward the sensor array with all its lights on. The SLQ-32 was not straining to collect against a difficult target. It was receiving a complete electronic profile of a Soviet-era aircraft variant that had made itself available for comprehensive analysis at close range and high signal strength, which in the signals intelligence community is approximately the equivalent of a subject sitting down in front of you, introducing themselves and handing you their CV. Full collection on the fencer, the electronic warfare officer reported. Terrain following radar, weapon aiming radar in standby, radar altimeter, communications suite. We have everything. This is the cleanest fencer profile we've collected since the March incident. Is he in active weapons mode? The tactical action officer asked. Negative. Weapon systems in standby. He's here for the show, not the sequel. The pilot made his first pass at 11:59. 200 feet. Approximately 500 yards off the port beam. Speed approximately 350 knots at the run-in point, which is fast enough to make the pass impressive and slow enough to make the photography workable. A balance that suggests the pilot had thought about the media product as well as the tactical statement. The pass generated significant noise, considerable wake turbulence at 200 feet, and from the bridge team's perspective, the specific visual of a large Soviet-era aircraft going by very fast at very low altitude, which is genuinely dramatic regardless of how many times you have seen it. The officer of the deck noted the bearing altitude estimate, speed estimate, and past geometry in the ship's log with the tone she used for all significant navigational events, which is to say the tone of a person recording information accurately and professionally. Her coffee had gone cold during the 9 minutes of approach. She had not noticed. On the weather deck, forward of the bridge, a boatswain's mate who had been splicing line on a cleat fitting looked up as the Su-24 passed. He watched it bank into its circuit for the second pass, afterburners lit, the specific sound of a 1970s Soviet turbofan doing what it was built to do, diminishing to the east. He watched it for 3 seconds. Then he looked back at his splice. It was good splice work. The aircraft was loud and fast, and not in any sense that required his operational input, his problem. The Su-24 made 4 passes over approximately 28 minutes. Each pass was logged. Each pass was collected against by the SLQ-32, which by the second pass had completed a full technical profile and was spending the remaining 3 passes refining the altimeter signature calibration data and building what the electronic warfare officer described in the after-action report as the most comprehensive, close-range Fencer D electronic profile in the 6th Fleet Collection database. The aircraft's fire control radar came out of standby briefly during the 3rd pass. Not to lock, but the way a system sometimes cycles through a self-check during aggressive maneuvering. It came out of standby for 1.4 seconds. The SLQ-32 collected the full activation signature in approximately 0.3 seconds and had a complete fire control radar profile logged before the system went back to standby. The pilot probably did not know the radar had briefly activated. The SLQ-32 definitely did. Are they going to claim they disabled our Aegis? The executive officer asked, watching the 4th pass track on the display. The tactical action officer looked at the SPY-1D display, which was tracking the Su-24 with the relaxed confidence of a system that has been tracking supersonic aircraft since before the pilot was born. Based on previous incidents, ma'am, yes. Russian state media will report that the Su-24's electronic countermeasures temporarily disabled our combat systems and forced us to change course. Did we change course? No, ma'am. We maintained course and speed throughout. Did anything get disabled? The SEWIP was in a scheduled software update for part of the approach window, but it completed early. Everything else was fully operational the entire time. A pause. The Aegis calculated a weapons employment solution on him at 11:53. We just didn't tell him about it. The executive officer made a note. It was not a long note. Some situations summarize themselves. Here's the thing about the electronic countermeasures narrative. that will appear in Russian state media within approximately 4 hours of the Su-24's return to Saki. In 2014, an earlier incident in this same body of water produced headlines claiming that a Su-24's Khibiny electronic countermeasure system had disabled USS Donald Cook's Aegis combat system, causing the crew to request shore leave in emotional distress. This story was reported, repeated, amplified, and embedded in Russian state media's standing narrative about American naval vulnerability in the Black Sea, with a commitment that the evidence has never been able to dislodge because the evidence has never been the relevant variable in this particular information environment. It is a very good story. It is entirely false. The Aegis combat system was fully operational throughout every encounter. The crew did not request shore leave in distress. The ship continued its transit. But the story has a life independent of its accuracy, which is a property that certain narratives share with certain organisms. They survive because they are useful, not because they are correct. The Khibiny electronic countermeasure pod is a real system. It is capable of jamming specific radar bands with genuine effectiveness against certain threat systems. Against the AN/SPY-1D phased array radar, operating across multiple frequency bands simultaneously with redundant processing, it produces an effect that the Aegis operators describe as a data point, a signal they note, record, account for, and continue working around. It does not disable the Aegis. It does not suppress the Aegis. It tells the Aegis what frequency band it is working in and at what power level, and the Aegis logs this information and continues tracking the aircraft that is broadcasting it. The Khibiny in this interaction is less a jammer than a very expensive signal that the SLQ-32 collects free of charge. The pilot landed at Saki at approximately 12:47. The aircraft was serviced. The crew filed their mission reports, the footage from the nose camera and the wingman's camera. There was a second aircraft flying at altitude for the photography, was packaged for the media team. By 15:30, the footage was on Russian state television, with narration describing an act of bold aerial confrontation that had demonstrated Russian resolve and highlighted American vulnerability in the Black Sea. The graphics were good. The footage was genuinely dramatic. A Su-24 at 200 feet over a gray sea is an impressive visual regardless of what you think about the geopolitics involved. A retired general appeared to explain the strategic significance. The narrative of Aegis disruption, which has been appearing in various forms in Russian state media since 2014, was restated with updated imagery. USS Donald Cook's log for the engagement period read, 11:52 to 12:27, air contact assessed Su-24 Fencer D, conducted 4 low-altitude passes, CPA 500 yards port beam, altitude approximately 200 feet. No weapons employment, no hostile action, no course change. SEWIP update completed 11:57. Full electronic warfare collection achieved all 4 passes. No damage, no personnel losses. The incident report was 8 pages, most of which was the SLQ-32 Technical Collection Annex, which included the Fencer D fire control radar activation signature from Pass 3, a complete Khibiny pod emission profile, an updated terrain-following radar frequency catalog, and a communications intercept package that included the pilot's pre-mission briefing communications, his run-in call to the Saki control tower, and a post-mission radio exchange in which he described the 4th pass as cleaner than the 3rd in terms of his lineup geometry. This was, from the pilot's perspective, a quality control observation about his flying. From the collection perspective, it was confirmation that the radio intercept link was working at full fidelity throughout the engagement. The cost accounting is straightforward. one Su-24 fencer sortie from Saki. Approximately $45,000 in operational costs, fuel, airframe hours. The collection value produced for the 6th Fleet and the broader NATO intelligence architecture. Harder to price, but the Fencer D fire control radar activation signature alone, a 1.4-second event that the pilot probably did not register, had been on the collection wish list for 18 months. The SLQ-32 got it in 0.3 seconds during Pass 3. It is now in the threat library. The next time a Fencer D activates that system in the vicinity of any NATO platform carrying the current threat library, the response time and classification accuracy improve by a margin that matters at the specific moment it is needed. The SEWIP update footnote was reviewed 3 weeks later by the electronic warfare officer's relief during turnover. The relief asked about the accelerated integration sequence. The outgoing officer explained the timeline. The Su-24 was not mentioned. The maintenance documentation did not require it to be. But the relief, being a professional, asked a follow-up question. Did anything make the acceleration necessary? The timing was good, the outgoing officer said. This is the technically accurate answer. It is also the complete answer. Sometimes timing is good because you push, and sometimes you push because the timing needs to be good, and the documentation does not distinguish between them, which is a feature of well-written maintenance documentation. The Russian state media broadcast ran for 11 minutes. It described a transformed Black Sea security environment. It described demonstrated American vulnerability. It described the fearless airmanship of the crew, which was real. Flying a Soviet-era aircraft at 200 feet at 350 knots over open water is genuinely demanding regardless of who is watching. It described the Aegis as having been disrupted, which was not real. It did not describe the 1.4-second fire control radar activation on Pass 3. It did not describe the Khibiny pod emission profile. It did not describe the 18-month collection wish list item that had been resolved in 0.3 seconds. It did not describe the boatswain's mate who looked up from his splice for 3 seconds and then went back to work. The documentary record of the morning sits in a classified database at 6th Fleet and in the NATO intelligence architecture and in the SEWIP program office, where the accelerated update integration technique is being evaluated for inclusion in the next revision of the maintenance manual. It is not 11 minutes long. It is 8 pages and a collection annex. 8 pages that will be read by people who will use them the next time a fencer lifts off from Saki, at which point the classification timeline will be slightly shorter and the collection will be slightly more complete, because that is the direction this has been moving since the first time it happened. And that direction does not change based on what Russian state television says about it. The boatswain's mate finished his splice at 12:35. It was excellent work. It held. Bye for now.